Joining me now is from the Social Policy Unit, Ana Ika. Ana, kia ora, thank you for your time today.
Kia ora, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
You and I have chatted about the poverty situation beforehand, and poverty is best summed up as people who don't have choices. It makes them particularly vulnerable to predatory lending, to saying, well, hey, we can give you your choices back at some exorbitant interest rates. And hey, buy now, pay later. Look, if you pay on time, it may be a useful scheme, but they don't make their money from people that pay on time, right?
Yeah, buy now, pay later is a little bit of a lot of people have question marks on it because a lot of people don't actually know how it works.
Yep.
But it's an interest-free financial fintech product. So fintech is financial technology, and so it's an innovative financial product that allows you to defer a payment. And
Yep.
so when you sign up to it, you can use it to buy whatever you need for it. It's available in I think it's over 4,000 merchants or retail spaces. It's not just retail, it's services like massages,
Okay.
flights. You can use it. You can use buy now, pay later in a myriad of different areas. And the reason why it's quite popular is because it sort of sits outside the Triple CFA, which is the legislation that governs how consumer credit is regulated in New Zealand. And because it's interest-free product, it sort of curtails the legislation. And it's not. There are some form of partial regulation on it, but
Yep.
in regards to affordability assessments, they don't have to run that for people who sign up to buy now, pay later. So they don't have to check how much debt you have, how much income you have. They just give you sort of a minimal credit limit. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you pay on time, then that credit limit continues to increase over time. Yeah, so people don't necessarily, so it's not the same as a credit card. I think that's what we're trying to
Yeah.
push. It's not the same as a credit card. Credit card will take you days, weeks to get. And buy now, pay later, you can get within minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, honestly. And whilst not charging interest, there are some fishhooks on this. I know that retailers have to pay some of that burden because people would be spending money they otherwise wouldn't be spending. But for people that aren't able to make those payments, or are in a situation where they're now, thanks to this scheme, able to make payments or make purchases on things other than the essentials, this can be a bit of a trap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big issues, and the reason why we have advocated against or have advocated for getting buy now, pay later regulated, is because of its presence in what we call fast consumer moving goods, and so that's things like things that can get used up straight away, like food,
Yep.
like cleaning products, like those sorts of items. And when you're looking at the type of customers who are using buy now, pay later and fast consumer moving goods, it's usually those who are vulnerable or usually those who are in poverty or living in financial hardship. I mean, it just goes back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Those that right at the bottom, they're in survival instincts, and so their purchasing behaviors are on things like food, on things like that they need to be able to survive. And so that's our concern, and where we've sort of raised the concern is buy now, pay later is present in that, like the grocery sector, when it comes to food. Now it's in I think it's in the Z stations with fuel. But now we're seeing this crossover into the retail space, and so that's what the paper that we've released last week was about. Booze now, pay later, is its crossover into a product that ultimately creates over $9 billion in social harm for New Zealanders.
Yeah, and hugely difficult for people who have addictions in this space, and that they no longer need to have the money in order to feed their addiction. This sort of ratchets up the temptation level. And hey, credit where it's due. Pun intended. This may not have been an intended consequence. It's all about convenience and availability, and that's what consumers are looking for. But for people who are trapped in addiction, this is likely to be a huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's limited at the moment in regards to the number of retail outlets that it's available in. But we know anecdotally and from speaking to retailers is that when you have Afterpay available as a payment option, or Afterpay or Zip or Klarna. Those are the three big buy now, pay later services here in New Zealand. When you have those as payment options available at the checkout, whether it's online or whether it's in store, that increases sales for that particular retailer. So
Yep.
there is a financial incentive for retailers to be able to adopt it. But again, our major concern is when it moves into those spaces like fast moving consumer goods and also into the alcohol space, because we can understand that the other angle on this, Andrew, is that for a lot of those families that we support, they don't have access to tier one or tier two lenders
Yep.
because they've got bad credit or they've got low income, and so buy now pay later is the only alternative type of credit that they can access. And so initially after COVID, we were seeing a lot of our families use buy now pay later for things like clothes, for things like blankets, for items that they needed in their house. But now we're seeing a significant shift from buying those types of items to buying groceries and meat and
Yep.
fuel types of items. And so that's where our concern is.
And certainly desperate people make desperate choices, and this is another choice, this is another offering. You can also understand that this is a way for people to be able to look after themselves, even if they don't have the resources, without having to go to a food bank, without having to put their hand up and say, you know what, I need some budgeting help. Although actually, if they got to that point, they would get actual help sooner rather than credit for something and delaying the problem and making it worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, we've seen that when we have chats with with our whānau that use buy now, pay later, it's so much easier for them just to go to Mad Butcher and afterpay some meat than it is for them to come to the Salvation Army to sit with our staff to do sort of a welfare assessment so that we can see how they're doing. It's a lot that they're not interested in it. They want to get the food immediately.
Yep.
And then I guess one of the big issues, and we're trying to learn how to increase financial literacy in a way, is that a lot of our families don't understand that buy now pay later has a stacking effect. And so if you use buy now pay later this week on something, it's divided over 6 to 8 weeks, and then if you use it the next week, you're building on top of what you've already purchased. And so families, something that's like $20, they might think they're paying $5, but in the next week you're paying $15 because you're stacking all of those purchases. And then eventually you get to a point where a lot of our families are in, is where all of their income is going towards paying back their buy now pay later debts. And so that's a significant concern for us.
And there's first cab on the rank, isn't that right? That buy now pay later has direct access to bank accounts to get in early to get that money. What happens if the money isn't there? What is the consequences of people not being able to pay later?
Yeah, so they get defaulted. So they get a default and then they get charged a default fee. There are, since MB started doing consultations around buy now pay later in New Zealand, and so the buy now pay later provider services have started to increase, the hardship supports and to be able to engage with customers who fall into hardship. But ultimately they get defaulted and then they get charged. I think it's a certain amount depending on what that purchase amount is.
Yep.
But if you refer back to my last comment around that stacking effect, and they're defaulting on multiple purchases, that's multiple fees being charged to that customer, and then their account will get closed down, and usually they are having to pay back that debt back to the buy now pay later services, and usually that's when they come to the Salvation Army
Yeah.
for support to be able to advocate in how do you use the hardship options, because even though there are hardship options there, a lot of the families that we support don't necessarily know how to navigate that process, or to be able to flag it earlier on with the buy now pay later provider that they are unable to keep up with these payments. And so and then also it affects their credit scores as well.
Yeah.
So there are multiple things that happen to our families when they're defaulting on these afterpay payments, or Zip or Klarna or whichever buy now pay later it is. But afterpay is the most prominent buy now pay later service in New Zealand.
And hey, their problems are so much worse by the time they come to the Salvation Army than they might have been otherwise. And let's turn to the fence at the top of the cliff. What would you like to see changed in the regulations? Less loopholes, or perhaps some products that you can't buy now, pay later on? Let's take alcohol off the list to start with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in our paper we've sort of outlined the tiered approaches. First of all, is to prevent the use of buy now pay later in the alcohol retail space. And it's not like this is not something foreign. This is not something new. Because we've been able to win, or not win, or we've been able to get alcohol retailers to implement a policy or a condition in their license where they are not allowing buy now pay later payment options.
Yep.
And so we've seen it with bottle stores, we've seen it with grocery stores, and so we've seen it put into local alcohol policies, and so we know that it's feasible and that it can happen because we're seeing it happen across different alcohol license holders and across different parts of the country. And so if we just include it into the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, restricting buy now pay later as a payment option for off licenses. Our focus is primarily on off license, so bottle stores, remote sellers, and grocery stores. Those alcohol retailers. That's where our primary focus is on. So that's what our recommendations are. Of course, if we go down the line, a wider regulation, if we fully bring buy now pay later under the triple CFA, but again, we're trying to be ambitious, and we're also trying to be realistic, and so we have those options outlined there.
And certainly, as you mentioned beforehand, retailers also doing it tough. They're doing what they can to promote more customers in the door so they can pay their own bills in this space. But for people who have not only poverty but self-medicating with alcohol, it is the perfect storm in some ways. So thank you so much for the work, the research, the lobbying and advocacy that you do in the space, Anna. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.